Today, I have the pleasure of introducing our Thursday's very own Courtney Schuster to come up and do her teaching. She's been married to her husband, Bo, for 7 years, and they have 2 adorable kids, Finn, 3, and Emmy, 1, and 1 on the way. And Courtney said you can find her at the beach, at the park, or eating Chick-fil-A. And if you do know Courtney, she's like the queen of park play dates. She's wonderful at setting them up. Some of you may even recognize her from meeting her at the park. So please help me introduce Courtney.
Good morning. I'm really happy because we haven't quite jumped on the bandwagon of being like the Christmas card picture family. And last time I was up here talking, poor little Emmy was just born and she was in the carrier, but you couldn't really see her face. She was like so shoved down there. And so this is what she looks like, you guys. Yay! She made it. Okay. So this morning, we get to talk about inspiring young readers. And not just inspiring any young readers, inspiring our young readers, right? And just the whole process behind that and finding joy in it and everything that entails. So a little background. I grew up way out in the country. I'm from Visalia, if anybody knows where that is. It's farmland. Yes, some people do. That's awesome. Some people know where that is. I grew up in a small house. We had a big yard. We had orange groves all around us. So it was an awesome childhood. But my favorite thing to do when I was a kid was to read a book and then to go outside and reenact said books. And we had lots of dogs, lots of cats. So there was a potential for a full cast of characters if need be, which was awesome. I just loved reading, and I was really passionate about stories when I was young. And I couldn't remember, those of you that have known me for more than a couple minutes know that I have a terrible memory. And so I had to ask my mom, what did you and my dad do when I was young, in the toddler years? How was reading kind of incorporated into our life? How did that start or that passion kind of ignite? And she said, I have an older brother, and she and my dad would take turns each night kind of reading to us before bed. And then also books kind of went where we went. So books were in the car when we were going on road trips or just driving places, running errands. Books were the things that were when we went to restaurants. So they were just around and incorporated. And then she reminded me, because this I actually remembered, was that at some point, my dad stopped reading to us. And it wasn't because he was taking a hiatus or he was on a strike. He actually started telling us stories instead. And it became this incredibly exciting personal experience for me and my brother, just this whole aspect of storytelling. And I can remember that is kind of what got me hooked with that personal connection with my dad and this intimate time that we had together. I mean, we could interact in the stories. We could change the plot. We could say, no, this character has a green hat, not a blue hat. And it was just this fun time to connect with my dad. And so that hooked and ignited this passion for me for reading and storytelling, which eventually made me want to have this goal of becoming a writer. That was my big dream, was that I was gonna be a writer and a famous one. And so I even, I'm not in any books right now. I even had an opportunity to go up to Alaska to go to grad school and get a master's degree in creative writing, but God had completely different plans and instead sent me and my husband down to sunny South Orange County and to start having babies instead. And those of you, all of us, that have babies, you know that once you have your first, your whole life kind of changes, right? There's so many changes that your family goes through. You have this new little life. It has needs. You have a new little person to put before yourself, aside from your husband. So there's just all these big changes, and you have new priorities, and your priorities shift. And so this love and this passion that I had for reading was no longer a priority. It was something that I did if I had an extra 10 minutes during nap time and I wasn't falling asleep, or at bedtime after I had put my son to bed. And if I had an extra 10 minutes to read something that I wanted to read, I could do it. But it just wasn't a part of my life anymore, regardless of how I felt about that, or regardless of my relationship with reading. And so it wasn't until, full disclosure, I'm clearly lacking in the child development department, which you all will find out by the end of this. I finally noticed when my son turned 2 was that there was a huge discrepancy between the way that I viewed reading and my passion for books, my passion for novels, and just stories and the connection that that brings was completely lost on my son. He could care less about books. He just was not interested. He would rather, granted, he's all boy, but he would rather dress up as the Hulk and smash things. He'd rather jump off our couch, or he'd rather take the book and throw it, but to actually walk into a room and see my son sitting there, engaged, having a book open and excited about it, just wasn't something that was ever happening or experienced. And to his credit, reading wasn't something that we did. I didn't really think about reading too much with him. I mean, life is full, life is busy. Reading wasn't something that we just did on a regular basis. It was like, hey, we're looking for something to do for 5 minutes, so let's go just pick a book and let's try to read it. But there was no consistency, so he was never quite interested in it. And so this really got me to think and to challenge myself, because there were so many other areas that I was pouring into my son, but this was not one of them. And so I had to dive into to figure out why reading is important, and this is the direction we're going this morning, is just why? Why is reading an important skill to teach our kids, to instill in our kids, just the basics of that? And then also we're gonna move into just some practical ways that we can do this. And again, this is probably a huge refresher for most of you, but for me, this was all new stuff that I had to learn and kind of rediscover and trial and error and figure out what works best for my unique kids. And then lastly, we're gonna kind of talk about the awesome benefit and opportunity we have to invest in our kids. And we can use this simple thing as reading, that's such a common thing and a necessary thing, a necessary skill for them to learn, but it's such a great opportunity for teachable moments, to instill values in them, and it's just another great way to connect with our kids. So let's get started. Longest opening ever. You have an outline. I'm a big outline person, so if you're like me, it helps me to take notes. So the first point, what we're going to go over, is that we need to learn the importance of reading. So why read, right? And we're going to go over 6 key benefits. There's so many benefits that you guys, I mean, you can find these resources out there anywhere. But I narrowed it down to kind of 6 chunky ones that we can kind of just briefly discuss and go over and refresh. But the first key benefit, what we're going to have, there we go, is cognitive skills and language development, which I know we all can acknowledge that this is something, right? This is like the very basic thing that reading gives us, is those cognitive skills and language development, which is simply the ability to understand. Cognitive skills, right? To gain knowledge and to decipher the language behind it. So what's interesting also, what I found out, is that when you're reading a book, you're reading somebody else's words, right? You're reading somebody else's vocabulary, somebody else's grammatical usage, which is different than what 90% of your kids are hearing at home. So just the simple fact that you're reading somebody else's voice is another way for them to develop just that new literacy knowledge and those language skills. So next will be listening skills, which is huge for our family, because I'm sure all of you, especially if you have toddlers, you can ask the question, are you listening to me? Did you hear what mama said? But we all know that listening, it's not just hearing what's said, right? It's the ability to understand the words and then relate to them in some way. And these pre-reading skills enable your child to understand the story, recall it, discuss it, and even retell it, reenact it with animals, which is great. It helps them to connect tone, pauses between the word. All these are pre-reading skills that we can develop early in our preschool aged kids, and they don't even know it, right? We're just setting up these building blocks for them to become readers. So the next one is bonding, which is what we're going to further dive into in our third point, but I just wanted to briefly touch into this, is child bonding and the parent relationship. our lives are full, right? It's full in so many ways. And especially if you start tacking on the kids, it becomes even more full. And so just having that time to slow down and connect and invest in a way that you wouldn't normally get to, and being able to do that in a blocked out time, such as reading, where it is kind of a quiet, focused time on them, is super beneficial for your relationship. The next one is attention span and self-control, which those of you that were here last semester, they did a teaching on the strong-willed child, and we breed those. So not only is my 3-year-old strong-willed, but my 1-year-old is also strong-willed. And so with that, this is such a key thing that we have to be purposeful in developing in our kids, is that self-control, just because of the way that they have been created, right? And so being able to be consistent with reading and having these set times is so helpful in establishing that. My son, like I said, he wouldn't sit for more than 0.5 seconds, but now, after a lot of patience, a lot of grace for all parties involved, he's capable to sit only because there's been consistency, right? And that has helped foster his self-control and being able to do that, even as a 3-year-old. The next one is encourage and promote creativity. You guys are great note takers. I really like this. I see all your pens moving. So books, this is what grabbed me, right? Was the creativity aspect of books. I loved those stories. I loved imagining. I loved pretending. And that's what books can do. They can open up these new worlds, stir up their little vivid imaginations. It can feed their creativity. And that is super helpful for eventually developing their interest later on. It also, which is interesting to think about, it can develop empathy in our kids, because we're able to put ourselves in somebody else's shoes or somebody else's just eyes and see things differently and experience different things and use those in teachable moments. Which goes right next to our last key benefit, which is life lessons and those teachable moments. So Healthline, they had a quote, I wanted to read it to you guys. It says, "Books provide an opportunity to talk about real world situations in age-appropriate ways." So targeted books are great in getting conversations started with our kids, especially when they're specific for an age, right? A big thing for us was that when we started potty training, there was a potty training book that we could read to our son to kind of introduce these concepts, to kind of help him understand what's going on, and then open up that means of communication to talk about it more and discuss it and figure it out. Or there's more targeted books about a new brother or a new sister, or even the heavier topics like death or sickness that is on their level and helps them to understand, and again, fosters that connection and that communication between you two. Okay, so all those points are the backbone of why we read to our kids. So let's go over some how-tos, because this was the big part for me. I'm not somebody that can just imagine and pull things out of thin air like, oh, we should do this today. That sounds fun. I need help. I need somebody to say, hey, you need to do A, B, C, and D. Go and see what happens. And so that's what I'm going to do. For those of you, again, this may be a refresher, but hopefully some of these you can find helpful. So one of the first, point number 2, get engaged in the reading. There we go. My little note takers. Okay, model a love of reading, right? This was something that I wasn't doing. I love reading, you guys. I love it so much. But I just wasn't reading around my kid. Even if I was reading for 10 minutes, he wasn't seeing it. He wasn't seeing any of that. He wasn't seeing the joy I got from that. He wasn't seeing me talk about the books that I was reading. And we've all heard that more is caught than taught, right? And so our little kids are watching us. And so what a great way to encourage them to read, by just modeling a love for it. Another one is, you guys are probably like, duh, read to them. I'm so sorry, this is for me, you guys. It's not necessarily for you. Just read to them. I don't know why that was such a hard concept for me to understand. But even with a toddler who struggles to sit, or a baby that you might think too young, we can't underestimate their abilities. I know that we need to probably reevaluate our expectations. I know that's what I had to do. But they're capable of a lot more than I think I expect what my kids can do. I know that my son can sit right? Now I know he can sit, but before I didn't know he could. I had an expectation that he was just a free-spirited kid. He would never sit, and that was that. We'd never read again, but here we are. Another one is just to run with their interests, right? My son is huge into whales. He loves whales and the weather. Letter W is our word for the month, is whales and weather. And he could read as many books about that as possible. And again, my son is, I'm sure if you haven't met him yet, you will at some point meet him because that is my son. He's all over the place. But for him to just be excited about a book because it's something he's interested in, right? And it's okay if you want to buy I'm a big Amazon fan. You can go to the library. The library is a great resource, but Amazon is so easy. I get sucked in. And we have whale books. We have like 6 whale books. So he will sit there and read 6 books on whales, all with kind of the same information, but it's engaging to him and enough to keep him interested and want to keep going, which is huge. Another one, I know I already said this, but just to adjust our expectations and letting them move around. This was a huge thing for me because, again, I had a kid that wouldn't sit still. And so for me to place this expectation on him, okay, we're going to start reading, we're going to be consistent, and on that first day, he's going to sit there, hands crossed, legs folded, and listen to me. Wasn't realistic, right? It would take time, and it would take patience and love and grace and consistency for him to get to a place where he should be, right? I have an expectation on my 1-year-old right now. She's not 3, so the realistic expectation I have for her is that she can sit there, hold a book, and kind of flip-flop the pages back, and then kind of point at things and go, huh? You know, that's a real expectation for a 1-year-old, but she's engaged in a book. She's getting comfortable with that book. It's a pre-reading skill that we're teaching her just to even flip a page. So again, just having that patience and adjusting our expectations. And then lastly, another way is just to get involved in the reading. So if you have ever had this secret dream about becoming an actress, now is your opportunity to live it out, you guys. You have the best audience in the world. And I guarantee that a little 3-year-old or 2-year-old is going to love whatever silly voice you give to a character. I mean, even if you don't think it's a good, honest portrayal, they're still going to love it, right? The more expressive we can be and the more excited we can be in the storytelling is going to help them to be more engaged and excited about them themselves. Another way we can do this is to schedule time for it and what works best for your family, right? For us, we've had to kind of juggle things around, but what works for us is that Emmy's up before everybody else. And so I have a good 35 to 45 minutes every morning to just sit with her, and that's our time together. And so that's time when we read, that's just time for us to connect and kind of play together, just one-on-one. And then Finn's time for reading, we found what works best for him is during Emmy's first nap. So he has about 2 hours of mama time, and we get to sit and read, we get to do schoolwork and play, but really trying to, if you're that kind of person that has such a full, busy schedule, it helps to be able to set, hey, at this time, we know, it's just reading time. That way it's not unpredictable, and again, consistency is key. So another one, Pinterest, there are so many great ideas of a reading nook. Have you guys heard of a reading nook before? They are so cute, and you can do them so elaborate. You just have a corner in a room, you just throw pillows on the ground, you have baskets and little bins and fill it with books. You can do the Pinteresty stuff and decorate and have the wall shelves and stuff, but it's this own little private area that your kids can go to just to read. And they know, again, that that's a consistent place where they go. It's just for reading. And I know that my son, we live in a very small space right now. We're in the process of moving, and I'm already thinking, like, what corner can we put a little reading nook? Because I know for a little 3-year-old, he's going to be so excited just to have this little space for his whale books, right? Another one is, again, with running with their interests, is just let them pick the book. Even if it's the same book over and over and over and over again, if they are interested, that's okay, right? We read Goodnight Moon a lot, enough, right? But we let him keep doing that. And eventually, if it gets to a point where we've read it over and over and over again, it's like, okay, let's pick a new book. Let's just try a new book, and then we can read Goodnight Moon tomorrow night, and it's usually fine. It's not a big deal. But if they want to read the same book, that's totally fine. Not a big deal. Because again, we're just trying to establish reading in their lives and just a joy for it. Another one is role play outside of story time. Get your even stuffed animals involved. I know sometimes we like to play with our little, does anybody do this? Play with your little stuffed animals? Pets. Again, we can use the pets. But bringing the story to life outside of a book is huge. It's a huge way to bring that book to life and again, connect it, real life situations in a book. Helps them to be engaged. And lastly, just let them ask questions. I know for me, again, being the serious, passionate reader, I want to be able to open that book, go from start to finish, and you're just like getting through, no interruptions, you finish the book, yes, now let's talk. But when you're dealing with a little toddler, they're going to ask questions, right? My son's big thing is that we have this book, and there's random ladybugs on the page, on each page in the book. And he's so fascinated with these ladybugs that regardless of the content that I'm reading or regardless of what the story is, he's always like, what's that ladybug right there? What's that ladybug doing? And instead of dismissing him, instead of getting frustrated and saying, no, we're reading the story, it's important, we're at the climax, don't you understand? We can stop and engage them, right? Engaging them. And that's what my dad did. He included us in the storytelling. And that creates just more of a deeper personal connection with our kids and just this open, free space for them to play with us, to engage with us, to get involved with us. So being able to say, what do you think that ladybug's doing on that page? Is he watching the main character? What do you think he thinks about that main character? So just letting them ask questions is huge. Okay. So we have covered both the why and the how of reading to our children. But then lastly, like I said, in point number 3, I want to cover, I think it's on the back of your guys' page, yeah, is that we need to start investing in a reading relationship. There are so many benefits to this, you guys. And it's such a powerful tool in connecting with our kids. And again, this is something that I've never thought about. Until I really started digging into it. I thought reading was reading, it was important, and that was that. And we have a family, my husband is a firefighter, so daddy's gone a lot more than he's actually home. So majority of the time, mom is outnumbered. And that's hard, right? It's hard because I'm stretched between two little people that have two very real needs. And sometimes needs aren't met, or it's a challenging situation for everybody. But having these little chunked out pieces of time, these scheduled pieces of time, I'm able to sit down and just be with my kids. I'm able to just be with Emmy in the morning. I'm able just to be with Finn. And for him, being a 3-year-old, he has so many questions. He has so many thoughts in his little 3-year-old mind, things he wants to understand, things he doesn't understand, things he doesn't know that he needs to understand. And I have this awesome opportunity through reading. We have this awesome opportunity through reading to really invest in them, in the little people that they are, right? And in doing this, I have a couple subpoints. Again, we're giving them undivided attention, which, like I said, is huge. Right? We all have full lives. There's busyness within each day. There's demands of each day. There's priorities within each day. But being able to sit down and give them undivided attention is huge. Another way that you can just learn more about your child, right? Again, their opinion, their thoughts. And instead of them asking questions, you can engage them. It's an awesome opportunity for you to ask them questions. What did you think about this story? Just simple questions, right? Especially with where they're at. What did you think about this character? Do you think this character made a good decision? What would you do if you were the main character, right? And all these things are going to help us to figure out where they're at and be able to meet them where they're at and then steward them in the way that they should go. So another way is that it can develop a value system and the importance of being a discriminating reader, which is huge. There's so many opportunities for conversation about the book, characters, what you read, along with these teachable moments. Again, what should he have done? What shouldn't he have done? What would you do? Why would you do that? Why wouldn't you do that? All these things are going to have their little minds thinking and help them to understand, help them to question certain behaviors, certain characteristics, certain values, and instill those values. We can point out positive character traits like being trustworthy or responsible, patient, kind, forgiving, and question the negative with these teachable moments. It helps our children to become not only discriminating readers, but able to have good judgment even outside of the book. I can't tell you guys how many times we've read a book where there's a character that's not sharing, right? And then what do? You go outside and you have the exact same real life situation of somebody not sharing. And you're able to say, hey, this is a great teachable moment. Finn, what were you just sharing with this kid? No, I wasn't. Well, didn't we just read a book about this character? What happened in this book when this kid wasn't sharing? What should we share? What should we do? What would be the appropriate response? So just being able to take a book and apply it to real life is just going to deepen that understanding and further solidify and build up those character traits and those values that we're trying to teach and instill in our kids. So lastly, I just want to say, I know that, I'm sure you have all heard this, that you're out at the park, you're walking with your 1-year-old, 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old, you have a little kid next to you, or you're in the stroller, and some random stranger walks by you, and then they stop and they notice your kid. And they say, oh my goodness, how cute are they? Oh, so sweet. I remember when mine were that little. And then what do they typically say after that? Do you guys know? Have you? No, you have your hands full? Yes, I do. Thank you. What I hear a lot is that it goes by so fast. Close. You have your hands full, and it goes by so fast, right? Some people say it goes by in a blink of an eye. And sometimes when you're staring at your little tiny 6-month-old, you think, man, this is like, it's just a little baby. But now I'm looking back at baby pictures from even just my 3-year-old, and I get choked up because time has flown by. You guys, we only have a short amount of time with our kids, and we have been entrusted with each specific kid for us, right? As moms, that is such a big, worthy, important job, and we have this unique opportunity to invest. We've been called to build up, to train, to teach, to encourage, and to support our kids in the way that they should go, with the hope that they won't depart from it when they're older, right? And so I think it's important to really recognize that there's teachable moments everywhere, right? With our kids in every shape or form and everything that you kind of deal with. There's a way to have a teachable moment. But what an incredible opportunity that reading is such a necessary skill just for them to have, but that we can use that to really have those teachable moments to encourage those values that we want them to grow up in. And what an honor that is to be as their mom and the one entrusted with that, with these little lives. So I think we have do we have a handout? We have a handout for you guys. Just a super simple little book list we put together just to help you if you're like me that needs a book list. It's broken down into ages and just kind of subject matter. If you're just looking for anything interesting, a great resource, we have Compass Books. There's a bookstore on campus, just in the main building where all your kids are. They have a lot of great books. I think they're 10 cents cheaper than on Amazon. Oh, $1. Even better, you guys, $1. And they have got a lot of great resources. But anyway, just really want to encourage you guys that as moms, we have been gifted with such a special role to have in our kids' lives, and how great it is that we can use reading to do that. So have a great discussion. Thank you guys for listening to me this morning. And yeah, enjoy.